And let me get our opening. What in the world? We're having a technical problem over here for some reason. When I go to play our intro, it's not working. It shuts back down.
Hmm.
Let's see. Let me try it again. Yeah, it shuts back down. Do you have it available on your computer, Doc?
No, because I don't have my external drive with me.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay, we'll just roll without it then. I don't know. I have to look into that and see why it's not playing. It starts up like it's going to play, and then it says we can't open the program intro unsupported encoding settings. So I'm gonna have to look into that and see what that's about. But we are on and we are live. So I want to start off with peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, family. Thank you for joining us today. And we are live on Facebook again. And today, our topic that we're going to be discussing is why are we stuck? We're going to deal with manhood, masculinity. We're going to look at a few conversations / debates that were being had on colorism, on manhood and masculinity, and on slavery. And so let's go ahead and get started. Doc, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Dr. James Thomas Jones III, Captain Viola Jones's baby boy. I am an associate professor of African American Studies and History. I do Black intellectual history, civil rights, Black power, hip hop culture, manhood studies. Really into honoring hip hop as it reaches its 50th anniversary this year. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
All right. So Doc, let's start because you know, this topic goes well with the site. You want to go ahead and give a shout out about the site real quick?
Yeah. I was challenged by my students several years ago to do something with technology because I'm one of these old school guys who actually were berating my students about being on their cell phones while I was lecturing, and some of them showed me, well, their books are on their cell phones now. They're taking notes on their cell phones. They're actually going further into the material that I talk about via their cell phone. And so I took their challenge to do something positive with technology, and I created a blog site initially, manhoodraceculture.com. That's manhoodraceculture.com. There is no and in there. And I've recently, within the last year, created a YouTube channel, which is Manhood Race and Culture. Manhood Race and Culture on YouTube. So I focus upon African American male issues. I focus upon men, the idea of masculinity, and I also focus upon racial dynamics and the various issues that flow from that, and culture. I believe that so much of what informs our people is culturally based, and it is imperative that we go ahead and reclaim the narrative and reshape and refashion what it actually means to be Black. Because for so many people, their understanding of the personification of Blackness is, in a word, lacking. Um, yeah, that's me, and that's what I do. So if you would support us at manhoodraceculture.com, the blog site, or the YouTube channel, subscribe, because we're going to begin putting up video content on that platform right there.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Doc. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. How do you define manhood?
Oh, wow. I define manhood as a God ordained position of being, I was raised up within the Baptist church, and scripture that says quite simply, if you raise a child up the way he should go, when he's older, he shall not depart. I believe that the most brilliant example of manhood is men heading their household and being the priest of their homes and being able to serve in those crucial, critical, and commonly known roles as provider, protector, supporter of all that are placed under their leadership. And I take it very seriously, the idea that if one person within that household does not reach heaven, does not reach glory, that sits directly at the feet of the man,
Mm,
because the man should be focused upon his purpose, and he should also be humble enough and humbled to understand that it's actually God who is his provider and his director in regards to what he's doing. So all those things are rolling up into a kind of a common generic um, definition of manhood. But at the exact same time, when you're talking about Black men, it has to be tweaked a little bit, because our history has been so different from that of whites, new immigrants who eventually became white in America. And we've always had to deal with an idea of cooperation in Black America. We rarely have had the opportunity to have kind of the standard patriarchal one paycheck on earning home, and especially we don't have that now. And I think that those things, that definition of being a provider and Black men being in many ways marginalized and held below a bar of making less than $43,000, that being the median income of Black men, has an effect upon a people who have been inundated and swallowed lock, stock, and barrel the consumerism and that you find within a capitalist nation, and that has in many ways the want of material goods, the inability to access material goods serves as one of the primary battlefields that we see, as one of the catalysts for one of the primary battles that we see with Black men and Black women.
Okay, all right. And so since you made that I guess pathway when it comes to Black men, and there's that thing where, as you talked about the 43,000, and you will find that sometimes in the relationship the Black woman would make more of the money, and does that reduce his role as provider, or what does that make of him now?
It doesn't reduce his God ordained position as provider. I believe that if you are under the church, if you're under, especially under Black Baptist, Kojic, and what have you. We're all sort of emanating from the exact same jumping off point. Academicians would refer to it as patriarchal, where the man is making the decisions and what have you. However, we're dealing with a different, and we've been dealing with this difference for I would argue since the late 1980s, where I'm from Ohio, so I've seen the Rust Belt, and my father and all of my uncles and all of my fictive kin uncles, they all worked at at it used to be Detroit Empire Steel, and they were bought out by Armco, but they were steel workers,
Mm,
and they were making 70, 80, 90, sometimes 100,000
mm,
as common laborers with little more than a high school diploma.
mm,
Well, mechanization has led to the dismissal, the dispersal of many of those jobs. And we have a situation where the economy has shifted. We're no longer dealing with an economy that rests upon the production of anything. Jobs have
mhm,
been outsourced outside of the country by and I'll honor Huey P. Newton and intentionally not refer to these companies and these corporations as American companies and corporations because they're not. They're companies and corporations that are seeking to exploit cheap labor wherever they can find it. Wherever there's some poor people at, they'll put a factory there. Okay. And
mhm,
the American worker has been in many ways marginalized. And of course, if the American worker is marginalized, you know the black worker, black male worker is really marginalized. So we're dealing with a technological and also a service economy. And just yesterday in my class, my for some reason my students love to talk to me about these relationship issues and what have you. And I just pointed out to them, I had a class of 30,
mhm,
and in that class of 30, there were three African American males. And both of those brothers left class early. They've kind of bought into this whole idea of what being a black male is: come to class late, don't learn,
mhm,
and then leave early.
mhm,
So that left one, and I pointed out to them. I said, "Listen, um, there's approximately 25, 26 of you. You're gonna have to fight over this one brother."
mm,
And that's what when you're talking about needing a college degree, you're talking about some training and what have you. There are relatively few of us who are doing that, and it creates a very weird dynamic within Black America. Because
mhm,
I ask my students, it's a common question that I ask them, and I can't think of a single class that I have that is not overwhelmingly majority Black female, filled with nurses, which is a whole nother issue. And they will all attest to the the fact that they are Christians. And many of them are, somewhat hermeneutically sound, others less so. And they all agree that the man should be the head of the house. And when I put up that number of 42,000, and I deal specifically with my nursing students, and I say, now, that when you come out, if you're willing to work overtime, you're gonna make six figures immediately. Can you still be cooperative if you're making over 100,000 with a man that's making $42,300?
mm.
Does he have final say? And they're like, oh, and that creates it's the theory of how we've always done it is one thing, but the actual, we're not even talking about the application. We're talking about the tailoring of it to you just in a conversation leads you
Mm,
to, oh, I don't know if I can, because somewhere along the lines we've confused our status and our association with how we've always done it, with what makes prudent practical sense now. And there is an argument that could very well be made that there aren't many quote unquote, Kevin Samuels would often say this, there aren't enough wives out here for Black men who want wives.
Mm,
But the converse could also be said that if a man is not gainfully employed at a certain economic level, in this society with the way things are going now, he's rendered onto a scrap heap that's labeled unmarriageable,
mm,
because
mm,
our people are always the best at whatever it is that they do, and that flows all the way into the idea of consumerism and capitalism. They want things.
mhm,
They need things. They want, these reminds me of Kanye West, All Falls Down, you know, because they made us hate ourselves and love their wealth. That's why Shorty's holler where the ball is at. Um, we're in a very bad position where we have poor and working class people who have
mhm,
abandoned character,
mm,
art as being a significant factor in their evaluation criterion of a person's worth.
mm,
Nothing hurts my heart more than to see these videos of young Black girls, and they're asking them silly questions like, what would you rather have? A businessman who was gainfully employed, or a dope boy, and maybe 70% of the time they're saying they want a dope boy,
mm,
and want to adopt that type of lifestyle and things like that. It's not all of them, but it's many of them. And one of the things that I can attest to is quite simply the fact that those little girls, some of them never grow up. They age, but they don't grow up emotionally, mentally. And the same can be said conversely. I try to be very fair when talking
mhm,
about Black men and Black women. We have a lot of Black boys who are in the bodies of adult men
mm.
as well.
So Doc, how would you define what a wife is?
I follow the scriptural definition, which is quite simply a helpmeet.
Mm,
Someone who understands that she will never be number one in the man's life. That what she will be is actually will be is actually his number two, if not three, because his purpose is always going to be one, and he's always
mhm,
going to be subservient to God. And she has to understand that. And her worth and her value, as she sees herself, is in being a helpmeet and being a mother, as in creating something that is, for all intents and purposes, very everlasting, a legacy that will outlive her human life.
mm. Do you think that women
Keep
would
keep
have a
going. Keep going. Keep going. I have to step away for 1 second.
okay, yes, sir. And I think that with with it being said that she would have to accept never being number one, um, she can be number two or even a possible number three. We're dealing with a modern woman, quote unquote modern woman. Um, do you think that modern woman really understands that position, or even would even take the time out to really serve in that number three slot? Do
Mhm.
you see the modern woman actually being like that?
But a modern woman is not a wife.
Mm,
That's the truth of the matter. The modern woman is not a wife. And that's not period, but exclamation point. Those are, we often talk about you can't change a hoe into a housewife.
right.
Um, you can't turn a modern woman into a housewife,
Mm,
because there are other priorities. And we have to really be honest about the impact that socialization has upon Black men and Black women. It's everything, darn near everything, because it shapes what it is that you really do value. What do you really care about? And if your number one goal is to kind of take care of yourself, you might have some problems in being a husband or a wife, because both of those roles, especially when you're talking about children, they are thankless jobs from the outside world. You have to intrinsically believe that this thing is worth you doing. Um, I don't see a lot of people who are materialistic, especially women, being able to mute many of those things. And let's be very clear that within our history, to be fair to Black women, um, there have been many times where Black women have not had to go out there and get it to supplement the income of the home. Black
mhm,
men have always been last hired, first fired, since the moment of integration. So the idea that we can judge Black women who have been raised up within a society that has taught them, and they've been taught by the women who came before them. It's one of the reasons why so many Black girls and young Black women believe that they are going to need college degrees, because the history of our people has always been that Black men could be removed. And it's not even being removed from a dereliction of their personal duty to the family and to that woman. They could be removed. And, we're talking about the 19, really from 1866 going forward, the Ku Klux Klan or some white terrorist group could make that brother disappear. Okay.
mhm,
Today it is not only the white police, but also the Black police. So there are some reasons why um, older Black women have socialized, and older Black men have socialized their daughters to develop a way to take care of themselves. I understand the natural order of a woman getting married and being with a man, and they're going to be together for 50 years and what have you.
mhm,
In contemporary society, that has become much rarer than we would hope. And it's found in the history. If you read Paula Giddings' great book, When and Where I Enter, or Stephanie J. Shaw, one of my college professors at Ohio State, What a Woman Ought to Do and Ought to Be.
mhm,
Dr. Shaw's book, in every way, talks about how older Black women are imploring their daughters to go ahead and become traditional women, get married, have children, build a familial structure. Yet at the exact same time, they're still sending them money for college tuition. So to be Black in this society and to be relatively unanchored, truthfully, honestly, none of us know, what's around the corner for us. And when we talk about white America, every group is going to have their ups and downs,
mhm,
but far too often for Black folk, and I'm talking about on an individual singular level, we don't have people who can, especially financially, stand in the gap for us,
mhm,
not for a lengthy period of time. White folk might get doused with a little bit of water, we experience Hurricane Ike, Katrina when it's our time, and our whole thing is messed up sometimes for years. Okay. So I think that, to be fair to Black women, the idea of developing a way to take care of yourself kind of puts you not necessarily out of the realm of being a helpmeet, but it definitely causes some issues, especially when you are not, and they use church language here, and they use it really erroneously, equally yoked economically.
Mm, mm. Excellent. So that brings me. Lenny Kravitz did a song called "American Woman,"
Mhm.
and I'm going to read a few verses
American
of it.
woman, want you to stay away from me. Yeah.
Yeah. American woman, stay away from me. American woman, mama, let me be. Don't come hanging around my door. I don't want to see your face no more. I got more important things to do than spend my time growing old with you. Now, woman, stay away. American woman, listen what I say. American woman, get away from me. American woman, let me be.
Mhm.
Y'all seem
Very,
like y'all
very,
talking about the
very,
same
very,
woman.
very familiar with Lenny Kravitz. That's one of the things that shocks a lot of people about me is that I listen to rock music as well.
Mm,
So very familiar with Lenny Kravitz. Yeah, brilliant.
mhm, mm. And when I first heard that song, I automatically liked it. Um, but when I was
Folky and
listening to
soulful.
it, I was only thinking about the white woman.
Mhm.
Um, but as I continued to live in life, I began to see shit, Black women can be right, writing that piece too. Because it's like, what in the world? What happened to her?
What happened to who?
The Black woman.
I think that if you really want to trace that, some of those pivotal moments, I liken it to, well, historically speaking, we'll
Mhm,
deal with the historical part before we deal with the narrative part. But historically speaking, you have to go back to that moment of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Black men during that time were, I guess you could refer to them often as a man's man.
mm,
That you had a situation where if Black men were making the bulk of the money, that there were some consequences to that. And then you also have the philandering of even Black preachers and what have you. One of the things that Black America never wanted to accept, and many of them don't want to accept right now, is that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Had numerous entanglements from what
mhm,
people around him have said, even his best friend, Ralph Abernathy. But I think that the switch actually, you begin to see it. And of course, there's always something bubbling underneath the surface and before it comes up. If you look at the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, you'll find a movement amongst the sisters there to, in many ways, exert their agency. You have the feminist movement going on, and once again, if you trace the convoluted, often conflicting history of Black women and white women,
mhm,
Black women didn't then, and they do largely do not now, belong under the same umbrella and rubric of that holds white women. Um, Alice Walker. Alice Walker has that great quote where she says, because Black women are going to break away from feminism and create womanism. And Walker says that feminism is to womanism as purple is to lavender.
mm,
Close, but they're not the same thing. So I
mm,
think that initially within the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, you see women exerting some muscle. I think, well, when you look at the foundation of the African American Studies movement, you see a lot of sisters kind of being prominent there. You trace that, and this is all mid 60s. You trace it all the way to October 15th, 1966, when Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale sat down in the North Oakland Poverty Center and created the 10-point platform and program.
Mhm.
Within the Black Panther Party, it's one of the things that Huey theoretically can be celebrated upon, is that the Panthers were more egalitarian as far as gender goes than civil rights organizations were. But I think that when you really look at it, several things are going on, and you're talking about what happened to the Black American woman. She lives within a capitalist nation, and she's been socialized and educated as far as capitalism and things. And let's be honest, one needs money to survive.
Right.
Um, if we go back and we look at the Moynihan report, Daniel Patrick Moynihan's report, Moynihan is very, very clear his objective. He wants to figure out, why is it that immigrant groups can come to America in 1 to 2 generations, they're able to escape poverty, and Black folk appear to be chained to the bottom of the
Mhm.
socioeconomic ladder. And this government report, and don't attribute this to me, this is what the government came up with. They lay the reason for that at the feet of Black women. They're basically saying that Black women were given a choice between working it out with Black men, many of whom, we must add the footnote, they're not, many of these brothers are not marriageable,
Mm.
because they are mired in a desegregating economic moment where white folk are unwilling to hire them in anything beyond menial task. Black folk
Mhm.
in many ways integrated themselves out of economic stability, we can say, not necessarily power, but stability. We stopped supporting our own. And you have that, you have sisters and brothers who are going to PWIs, predominantly white institutions, in mass for the first time. They're learning these different things, and these things that they're learning impact and affect their understanding and comprehension of what success is. And success migrates away from going back to the third ward, to the fifth ward, um, you know, and working to uplift that community. It's now purchasing a home in a suburban area that will serve as a financial asset. So you have all this going on, Black men not being able to secure significant gainful employment, and Black women, in the working class and poor Black community, not being able to make ends meet. And so they took the welfare benefits. And unfortunately, a portion of that is that men could not be present in the home. And I think that once you get that ball rolling, it's going to be very hard to stop. One of the greatest rappers that's overlooked in my book is Grand Verbalizer Funkin' Lesson Brother J,
Mm.
X Clan. Okay. And, Brother J says, you know, ignorance is not a trend. And when
Mm.
you think about it, all you need is one generation to be ignorant. And the ways that we did it in the past are gone and never going to be retrieved again. So I think that that's what happened with Black men and Black women, that Black men, by and large, were not able to fill that role of provider. Protector, we could argue about. And I believe that Black women made a pivot, which was their right. They chose the economic route, thinking that this would bolster the income within their homes, and they were probably correct. Yet it had disastrous consequences, because now you have single female parent households, and you have a proliferation. We rarely talk about the 1970s proliferation of latchkey kids. because the mother now has to go out and work 2 jobs. And within that home, you have Black, we often talk about the impact that the absence of the Black father has upon Black boys. And there is an impact, there's a major impact. But rarely do we talk about the impact the absence of the Black father has upon Black girls. She no longer has a first love of her life. She no longer has a standard of what she's going to be looking for when she goes out. What she does have, though, is within the house a mother who's going to love and cater and dote to her son. Single Black women love their sons. Okay. And that's going to be instructive to her. That's going to become very familiar to her. And in many ways, that's what she's going to seek out, a Black male that is like a broken winged bird, always in trouble, always entangled with the law, irresponsible, and what have you. And let's be very, very clear that we gravitate towards what's familiar to us. And to this day, I can tell you that if you were to ask me what I find attractive or natural to gravitate to, I would point you to LL Cool J's "Around the Way Girl" to this very day. That's what it is. I was talking with my sister. She said, you know how old? I said, yeah. But that's what it is. That was imprinted upon me. Yeah.
And that reminds me, we did a program a few years back, and we had the question that was up there, and it was at least 5, I think 4 or 5 men on the panel. And we had the picture of what they would call the quote unquote the young lady in the ghetto that's going to nursing school and single parent, versus the woman that's up in corporate America making $100,000. And the question was, which one would we take? And all of us took the girl that was the single parent going to school. And disregarded the one that's in corporate America making $100,000. And that was very interesting.
Why? I'm interested. Why?
Yeah, it was very interesting to see that all of us picked the same woman, that we would all want to go be with, and all of us are from different backgrounds, but yet we honed in on that one and disregarded the other one. And when I asked, well, why is that? Some of the answers that I can remember was the one that's making $100,000, she's already married to the white man. And if you're not equaling that, what your words don't matter no more. And with the one that's the single parent that's going to to school or whatever, nursing school, her you can build something with, because she's not already made it there. She's still down at the bottom trying to get it. So she's just as hungry and wanting to be cooperative as you are. So your ability to achieve is greater with her than it is with the one that's already making $100,000.
That's interesting, because there was a secret betting pool that I didn't learn about, that I was involved in. I didn't learn about this until probably I was in my mid-30s, and the bettors within it were my family members, and they were betting that some of them said, yeah, it's going to eventually happen, and others were like, no, he's a Black nationalist. And what they were betting on is if I would end up marrying a white woman. Yeah. That was the bet. And they said, you're down at Ohio State. You're gonna be around a whole bunch of white women, this and that, your profession, what you do, ain't gonna be many Black women with PhDs and what have you, which is ironic, consider Kevin Samuels' snippet of "I'm a PhD." I never understood that logic. because, and one of my grandmothers, I was blessed to have three grandmothers. The Lord knew I needed some extra help apparently. She said, I see, and she worked at a place called O'Neill's. It was a department store, and
Mhm.
she worked basically in a janitorial position. And she says, I see how these white folk treat me at this level. I can only imagine what they put y'all through.
Mhm.
And so I think that that question is in many ways pivots and is predicated upon the idea of other people's perception, because you believe that someone who's made it in corporate America or whatever has assimilated to those people. And
Mhm.
the truth of the matter is that hell, we ain't even in the pot. We getting roasted right over the fire.
Mhm.
And but yet at the exact same time, we have to be able to kind of code switch and learn how to compartmentalize your mind and things like that. I recently had a conversation with my son a couple of days ago. He's interning at a architecture firm, and and my question is, so how many of us is down there? And he was like, one. I said, okay, well, at least you got somebody you can talk to. He said, no, one. I'm like,
Wow.
oh, you the one? And he said, yeah. And I told you, I said, look here, man, that's not, it's not the time for you to break out and be, Muhammad Akbar, Malcolm X down there. I said, don't. I said, you are the diversity, okay? And
Mm,
you have to use it for what it's useful for. You
mm,
have to, learn to play the game. And when they tell a joke, you're gonna have to laugh. You know,
mm,
even if you don't find it funny, you're gonna have to really learn how to survive. And in many ways, when you're talking about black manhood, to bring it back to black manhood, black masculinity, um, there has to be a strategy. There has to
mhm,
be an end goal and a strategy to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve. They're a part of that puzzle often. They're a
mhm,
part of what it is that you have to do, but at the same time, you can never lose your blackness. You might have to
mhm,
tuck it away, but you can't lose it.
mhm. Exactly.
That's
And just thinking about that, Doc, that's a lot of weight on his shoulders because depending on how he does, will say whether that door will be open to many more black men or not.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
that's a lot of weight to be on one person's shoulders.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we have to mentor in school our children to understand that you should seek to leave every area you've been in better for your people than when you arrived. Now, what that looks like on a case by case basis, I don't know, because there
Mm,
are some moments where blowing up the spot is going to make it better for
mhm,
other folk. I was somehow anointed at my job the radical brother,
mm,
and when they would go in, and even when I wasn't on the committee, one of my colleagues, she told me, she said, listen, it was the damnedest thing I ever seen. She said they had decided we were making that committee was making three hires, and they had decided because there was only one black person, this colleague I'm talking to about on the committee,
mhm,
they had decided that they were going to hire three white professors.
mm,
And then one of them said, "But who's going to tell Jones?
mm,
Because look here, I'm about trying to get the job done."
yeah.
And my superior at the time, he was Ethiopian, And I told him, I said, no, you're only doing this because I'm black. And he
Mm.
said, what do you mean? I'm Ethiopian. I said, you ain't black. Okay. It's a difference. And you need to start coming and talk to us before you hobnob with these other folk. Okay.
Mhm,
Because you don't know the history over here, you know.
mhm,
And it's one of those where the idea of manhood and masculinity is a tough one. One of the questions that I pose to my students when I'm talking about the period of American chattel slavery and black men is who's more manly, which action is more masculine. A brother who runs away from a plantation to start another life, he wants to experience freedom, but he leaves his family behind.
mm,
One that says quite simply, no, I can't leave my family. And he endures that lash within the peculiar institution. So a lot of it is in how you look at it. And like the question, the scenario that y'all created, I mean, a good argument could be made that that sister who's in corporate America hates those white folk guts because she got to deal with them on a daily basis versus the sister that is now trying to go to nursing school. You could rationalize and say, well, you know what? In her mind, okay, I get it now. White folk run the world, and she willing to sell you out, to get that scholarship, to be
mm,
what have you. So it's a case by case basis for me.
mhm. Yes, interesting. Because on the weekends I teach a class, the Men of God class, and just going through some of the things that our young brothers have to know in order to, understand their manhood, come into their godhood, and to be able to be out there in the world and not crumble,
Mm,
be able to face it head on and destroy any obstacle that is in their path. Um, and it's like we had a guy that was hooking up our security system, and he saw my board, that board that I got right there. And he
mm,
was like, "Oh, you teach a manhood class?" I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh man," I was breaking the stuff down to him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this is, I need to be a part of that." You know, there's a yearning
mhm,
in Black men to
mhm,
stand up and to be men.
mhm.
There's that yearning there, there's that desire there. Um, but then I think at some point they get hit with, if I really do this, what's gonna happen to me?
Mhm.
You know, and then the fear takes over, and then they punk out, you know. Um, what is it that we need to trump that fear part? Because you got the yearning,
Mhm.
but then when you begin to think and rationalize on what you're about to do, then that fear comes in and overweighs that yearning.
Yeah, I think that the easiest way, the most efficient way for our people, and I'm talking about us in mass, to trump that is that we really do need to accentuate Black excellence, Black male excellence in our midst. Um, that example of, yeah, I was, in the transparency to be able to say, yeah, I was scared. Okay. And, I went through it still. And this is where I ended up at. And I am willing to put my arm around your shoulder as you usher your way through this as well. Because there are some very real world economic consequences for some of the things that you may do. Some of the decisions, some of the responses to that yearning of being a Black man. And really it's not just endemic to Black men, but we're talking about Black men. I think that we need to have successful Black men who have made it through
Mhm.
to, in every way, usher others through. That we can't make it over and forget how we got over, and that there's some over there on the shore who still want to cross the River Jordan and make it into, into the land of plenty. So that's the way to do it, because
Mhm.
without that, you need older black men, experienced black men, successful black men who are able and willing to mentor that next generation that's coming. It's what our the fraternities need to be doing. It's what the black churches need to be doing. But to be able to do that, we need a cadre of men who have made it over and are
Mhm.
and have a servant's heart and are willing to go ahead and mentor some others. Unfortunately, and I can only report back what I've heard many black women talk about, and it is that much of the foolishness that we would attribute to teenagers, 20 somethings, undergraduate students, maybe some grad students, is being exhibited and perpetrated by men who are in their 50s, 60s. They've
Mhm.
never grown up. We need to create a standard of what's expected of black men. And if you can't meet that standard, you're not within the community, you're not considered a man. You're just a black male. And there should
Mhm.
be some very real world consequences to that. And that's, to take it back to something that I mentioned earlier, that's what the idea of socialization is about. You know, um,
Mhm.
my best friend, Damon Thomas, Damon loves his daughter.
Mhm.
Okay. And when hey, he loves life. There ain't no, you say whatever you want to about him. He love to smoke a little weed here and there. He love, you know what I'm saying? He does what he does, but he loves that girl. Okay.
Mm.
And she loves him. And when it comes time for her to seek a mate or whatever, he will be the standard
Mhm.
according to, that this is what a man does. This is what a
Mhm.
man is going, because once again, it's familiar. I think that we need to have black males who are familiar with success,
Mhm.
and success in a non-athletic or entertainment arena. That's crucial for
Mhm.
us, because when you really think about, what do you have a better chance of being, the CEO, or a significant employee within a
Mhm.
Fortune 500 company, or playing shooting guard for the LA Lakers?
Mhm.
The odds are so stacked against you athletically and as far as entertainment goes, that we need to get to a point where we're socializing and we're grooming our young men, um, that and really teaching them. And I believe this is a teaching that should be taught to young men and young women within our community. And it's definitely one of my hallmark catchphrases. It is quite simply, you got somewhere important to go. And I think that if they are taught, yeah, I got somewhere important that I'm going,
Right.
from the very beginning, that changes your intention from the moment that your feet hit the floor to begin your engagement with the outside world. You're
Mhm.
going somewhere.
Right.
And it's that's the teaching for me. Many people have always asked me, well, how did you navigate all the way to PhD in your first generation college and what have you? And I trace it back to the black educators that I had coming up in Mansfield, Ohio. And they, each one of them, majority of them, they impressed upon me that I had somewhere important that I was going, number one. And
Mhm.
number two, my mother impressed upon me that I was what the black community was sending to represent them
Mm.
in white America. She said, "Ain't nobody else coming. You it."
Mm.
And I had to prepare myself like that. And although it
Mhm.
wasn't in the the athletic arena, I was raised up in a situation where there was no greater shame. And
Mhm.
I know you've read the autobiography of Malcolm X. There was no greater shame that was ever heaped on Brother Malcolm than when he went in that boxing ring and that white boy whipped him. You
Mhm.
know, you better not go out there and lose an athletic contest, basketball. Y'all let them white boys run y'all.
Mhm.
You're gonna be looked at skeptically forever
Mhm.
within our community if you allow that to happen. For me, it wasn't athletically; it was intellectually.
Mhm.
Never, under no circumstances, will you
Mhm.
allow them to outdo you. And
Exactly.
realize that quite simply, you're gonna have to work. And this is the mantra that out of all the mantras that I wish that we could just stitch into hearts and souls of our children, you're gonna have to work twice as hard to get
Mhm.
half as far.
Mhm.
And when you really think about that, you're gonna have to put forth 4 times the effort to make up for the breaks and the connections that they have.
Mhm.
Because by and large, we ain't got that. We don't have that vast of a network to usher you
Mhm.
from point A to point B.
Mhm. Doc, you when you brought that up, it made me remember when my oldest son Rasul was going to school, and I had asked him something about his class and who was the top person in there, and he was like, "Oh, that little white boy over there." And I said, "Why are you allowing him to be over top of you?" And
Mhm,
he looked at me and I'm like, yeah, why are you allowing him to be over top of you? You're going to let him outwork you? You think that that's going to be acceptable to bring home that he outworks you? That he's the best in that class and you sitting right there? And, he was like, well, no, sir, then I'll make sure I'll be better than him. And next report period came around and he did it. And so we were walking out of the school and I was telling him how proud I was of it. And the principal pulled me to the side the next day and let me know that, she had overheard our conversation
mhm,
the 6 weeks prior. And she heard it this time, this happened over here, this end of the conversation. And she asked me, why would I put that kind of pressure on him? And this is a white principal. Why would I put that kind of pressure on him to make him to be, she said it's one thing to be the best in school, but to point out another top student and say, don't let that white boy be over you.
mhm,
Don't that was a pressure on him that he shouldn't have to live up to because it will break him because you're setting a standard that it may be okay in kindergarten, but when he get to second, when he get to third, when he get to ninth, when he get to 12th, when he gets into college, you're setting a standard that's going to be very difficult for him to break. So why are you setting him up for failure? And and I told that cracker, I said, look here, the standards that I set for my son, that's a black man. And he needs to know where his competition lies. And he needs to know that he has to destroy that white boy. He has to destroy him. He can't walk around and allow that white boy to be better than him. He just don't have
mhm,
that room.
mhm,
And he's going to grow into his godhood. And you should, when I said that, you should have seen her face just wrinkle up, and
mhm,
begin to turn red, because I'm telling her my son will grow into his godhood and he will rule. It was like, her whole demeanor just, changed, and she was just, I can't even have this conversation with you, and it runs off, you know. But and my thing was that's his job, and that's
yeah,
my job as his dad to make sure that thought is ingrained in him,
mhm,
that wherever he find them, that he's better than them, and it's not wrong. It's not wrong, but you got some of our people who say, well, I don't want to teach my child to be better than them. Shit, you's a fool.
Listening to that, it's almost verbatim. I don't know if you've ever read Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk.
Mm-mm.
Let me pull it up real quick, and it's really it's uncanny of what you just talked about, and what Du Bois is going to write. Yeah, if you can give me the privilege of sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can share this.
Good. You should be good.
It's a very interesting thing. And this is what Du Bois wrote. And he's talking about this moment in elementary school and what have you. And I'll start right down here. But Du Bois writes, in a Wheatwood schoolhouse, something put it into the boys and girls' heads to buy gorgeous visiting cards, 10 cents a package, in exchange. The exchange was merry, till one girl, a tall newcomer, refused my card, refused it peremptorily with a glance, side-eyed. Then it dawned upon me with a certain suddenness that I was different from the others, or like mayhap, in heart and life and longing, but shut out from their world by a vast veil. I had thereafter no desire to tear down that veil, to creep through. I held all beyond it in common contempt, and lived above it in a region of blue sky and great wandering shadows. That sky was bluest when I could beat my mates at examination time, or beat them at a foot race, or even beat their stringy heads. Yeah. And this is from Manhood Race Culture. For those who are watching us, things like this are up there. But there has to be a standard of Black excellence that is 365, 24/7. It can't just be in the athletic arena, and that's one of the things that has always bothered me. That here we can have brothers who would do all of these very darn near Marvel-like superhero feats on the athletic field, and yet when they come off of that court, they're intellectually feeble, they're inarticulate, and that's, to be honest with you, it's one of the things that I am often very happy to see, that professional athletes now have trainers who are teaching them how to engage the media and things like that, and actually have something significant to say, using platforms for something that is positive and good.
What do you think, since we're talking about that, what do you think about the comments Dion made about the offensive linemen, two-family home, this, that, and the other, the defensive lineman, single mother, and he took a lot of flack for that. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a gross generalization. Let me say that. There's probably no greater indicator that Black folk consume the same negative images and stereotypes as the dominant white community. And Dion had better be glad that he's a Black coach, because if he wasn't, he would have been fired for what it is that he said. That's not an accurate barometer. If it was, you wouldn't have the NFL Combine, where they poke and prod these brothers as if they're on a slave auction. And the individual that I would use to disprove what it is that Dion said is a gentleman who ironically played for two of the biggest rivals of my teams. He was at the U when the Ohio State University beat them. in
Mm,
02, Sean Taylor. And he
okay.
also played for the Redskins, and of course, I'm
Mhm.
a Cowboy fan. And I'll activate my membership again once Jerry Jones is gone. Okay, it's on hold. So any jokes we can. All right. But Sean Taylor comes from two-parent household, and I want to say his father was a sheriff.
Mm,
But when he was on that football field, according to Dion's, um, constructs, he acted like he was an orphan because he would tear
mhm,
your ass up. So
mhm,
I disagree. I disagree with what Dion was saying.
mhm,
And sort of a side note, I believe that this moment will be one that will be remembered and pointed to as to when Dion's demise does occur,
mm,
because he's not able to exhibit impulse control when it
mm,
comes to talking. He needs to realize that he is the equivalent of the president of the University of Colorado football team, not just a head coach. And
mhm,
he needs to move very, very, very cautiously and judiciously, because if they're not winning, they're going to show Dion exactly what they really do think about him. Right now, they're envisioning, well, yeah, we're going to be able to go and have these games, and yeah, okay, don't win and see what happens.
mm. So, Doc, if you were the president of the college, you would have disciplined Dion for his comments.
Yes, because this is a initial misstep,
Mm,
and Dion needs to be made aware before he makes the second, third, and fourth misstep, which will in every way compromise the University of Colorado's football aspirations, which they ain't had in a very long time. So yeah, he
mhm,
needed to be addressed.
mm. Definitely. I like you. I did not appreciate his comments, but is it like a I don't know, a rites of passage, or something more like, okay, you're allowed to say that when you are, famous, and you've done it in the sports world, or in the singing world, or even the acting world, and you're up there and you're talking, that you get the right to downplay Black people because you've made it now. Is that come to be like a rites of passage, where, okay, we ain't gonna say nothing because you are who you are?
Yeah, I don't think that you get the right to do it, but I believe that
Mm,
the punishment, the due punishment, is often muted from you. And it takes me back to something that one of my mentors had said, guaranteed. And he says, you got to remember that poor people can't talk shit.
mm,
And when you really think about it, it is the inability to weather the punishment that is held over your head that keeps you in line. If that punishment is ineffective to you, if you don't worry about that money that you're missing out on and what have you, well, what can they do to you? What can they do for you? You get what I'm
mm.
saying?
Exactly, exactly. There, I was doing a video the other day, and I still have to upload it to my YouTube. And I was talking like I was giving Michael Irving um, some guidance, in dealing with
Hmm.
white women and all of the thing. And I
Hmm.
talked a little bit on Kobe. Now we know Minister Farrakhan, coming this May, will be 90 years old.
Mm.
And he just did Savior's Day on Sunday. But when what is the lady name? I forget the lady name. Oprah Winfrey's friend,
Gail King.
Gail King. Yes, Gail King, and she was interviewing somebody, one of Kobe's friends. And you
Mhm.
remember she brought up that, he supposedly raped a white girl.
Mhm.
And Snoop went on Instagram.
Ironically, in Colorado.
Mm. Wow. And so, Snoop took to Instagram and gave a little message and called Gail a bitch.
Mhm.
And Minister Farrakhan at Savior's Day that year, addressed it and said, you know, Snoop was right for calling Gail the bitch because of what she's, the question how she did ask the girl, about Kobe. Um, and that was surprising because the minister has always taught us, don't call no woman no bitch. But in this instance, he stood up for it and said that, yeah, Snoop, you're right.
Mhm.
Um, what's your thoughts on that? Um, should Gail should not have asked that question? Was that a legitimate question?
I think she was asking Lisa Leslie, if I remember correctly, the black
Mhm.
WNBA player.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah. What is my perspective? Should she have asked that question?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't believe that you should have. I think that there has to be a understanding, and it's a very fine line
Hmm.
between calling someone to task and airing out the racist dirty laundry. If you go back and you look at the Cosby Show, ironically, the Cosby Show, with all the trouble that Bill Cosby ultimately was mired in, you'll see the name Alvin Toussaint.
Hmm.
And Alvin Toussaint, he's a black psychologist, and his job was to ensure that there were no negative images portrayed on the Cosby Show that damaged the ethnic brand of black folk.
Mm.
And when you really think about that, that is awesome and powerful.
Mm.
And you pursue and you look at the Cosby Show. You're hard pressed. Can you find any negative images? And it's, of course, that's not necessarily real life Black America, because we know that we have a diversity of Black folk that goes from, even within our families. I have individuals right now who are dealing with addiction, serious addictions, and I look at the other end of the continuum. I'm here with you right now, having these very pertinent and important discussions. So we're not a monolithic people. However, there needs to be a significant and serious understanding that, quite simply, it would be better for the race if you don't bring that up, especially in public,
Mm.
okay, in front of what we call mixed company. Um, we have to hold each other to task behind closed doors. You don't see anyone else doing that
Hmm.
in public. In many ways, we look as if we are all mired in a real life version of The Sims, and we're living
Mm.
as if we're a part of a social media, um, reality TV situation. So
Hmm.
no, I mean, there no, you got to have some impulse control, because we all know that there are so many things that are going on within the community. So why, in many ways, bring up that issue on such a public platform where not only the nation is watching, the world is watching,
Hmm.
and it furthers the idea, the misbelief that Black folk are just a mess, regardless of how much money they have, how much fame they have, and this and that.
Hmm.
Yeah, use an element of wisdom in regards to that. And once again, if you're Gail King, what can they do to you if you refuse to do it?
Hmm.
They're gonna do, fire you? You ain't Gail King don't recognize when her check post. You know, she got dough. You get what I'm saying? She ain't sitting there
Exactly.
waiting until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to see a Bank of America send a notification that you didn't got a deposit. You know,
Mhm,
her pockets are swole.
mhm,
So she should be
definitely.
able to say, no, we're not going to do it this way. We're not going to do this.
Mhm,
And the desire, the decision to not do it that way opens you up to whatever criticism that you receive.
mhm. And so, Doc, if we put it like that, and I like how you put it, the brand of Blackness, um, that is a duty from listening to what you're saying, that all of us share to
Mhm.
protect that brand of Blackness. How do we translate that message to those who, you know, don't even wear their Blackness on their sleeve or on their shoulders? You know, those that, or even can you interpret that message, translate that message to them to understand that, you know, this is what we have to do to protect our brand of who we are?
I'm going to use a line that I heard Dr. John Henry Clark say to Cornel West when they
Mm,
debated each other at Ohio State. Um, West had went off on his litany of something, and John Henry Clark just said, "You wouldn't say that to a Jew."
mm,
And Wes cracked up laughing, and he said, "You know what? You're right. You're right. I wouldn't. Um, you wouldn't question that if you were talking about the Jewish community because they are lock, stop together in protecting Israel.
mhm,
And if you step forward, and I've come across one or two who don't agree with that, and they refer to it as, you know, the land as Palestine and what have you, they check them in private, and you in many ways never hear them again. They're never to be heard from. They didn't been sent to the outer realm. They've been banished. Okay. Um, we're social beings. And when you entered this world, you only knew how to do two things. And one was to cry to alter your environment. When you wanted some milk or to eat or whatever, you cried to let them know, yo, something is wrong here. I'm uncomfortable. And
mhm,
to poop and piss. That's what you knew how to do when you got here. Everything else, and I do mean everything else, you learned through either participation or observation. So
mhm,
it's not even a question of can we teach that? It's a question of how do we teach it? And the way that we teach it is we educate our own, like everybody else educates their own.
mhm,
Okay. We have to the most important thing for our community is that we need to be growing. Winston Churchill said this. He said that the most important investment for a nation is books and bottles,
mm,
education and babies. Okay. We
mm,
having the babies, but we're allowing and people who don't necessarily agree with our perspective because our perspective is one that is going to be aimed at uplifting black folk and their status rests atop directly atop the oppression of black folk, just like the you talked about the principal trying to reprimand Jews saying don't put that type of pressure on him
mhm,
because he ain't really nothing but a little nigger boy, which is
mhm,
really what she's saying. She
mhm,
doesn't see greatness in him. Okay, we have to educate our own. And not only, and when I say we have to educate our own, I'm talking about not just Black children, Black teachers, Black professors, Black scholars.
mm,
Our studies and our inquiries have to mean something. Who cares what the level of rice consumption was in Essex County from 1620 to 1624? That's irrelevant to the liberation of Black folk.
mhm,
So
mhm,
we have to focus upon putting blackness center stage, and we have enough diversity to talk about what that looks like as far as what is your definition of blackness, but let us all agree that our ultimate destination, we trying to get to Detroit. Now you can get there by train, you can get there walking, you can ride a bicycle, you can drive your car, but we're going to Detroit. Now, whatever uniqueness you need to put on that, whatever twist, hey, do it. People from Texas would arrive in Detroit listening to DJ Screw. If that's what they want to do, let them do it, but they're going to Detroit. Right now, where we're at, we can't even agree that we're going to Detroit. Some of us going to Detroit, some going to Philly, some going to Des Moines, Iowa.
Mhm.
There is something to be said for like-mindedness. It is not accidental that I would venture to guess 95% of the individuals graduating from Notre Dame, and it's probably closer to the 99.9%, are all pro-life, because that's their religion, and those are the materials that they have read and studied a lifetime. We have to create a situation for Black children that they're not even aware of any fruits or any reason to betray their people.
Mm. That's right. That's right. And that would be a very beautiful thing, a very beautiful thing. I'd just like to take a break and just say to all of our watchers that's watching, you're watching the Doc and the Radical program. We come on every Wednesday at 5 p.m. and we live stream
Eastern
on
Standard Time. So
Eastern time.
look, the arrogance of Eastern Standard Time.
And we live stream every Wednesday at 5 p.m. To Facebook, and we're working on getting back onto YouTube to do it as well. And I want to take this time to acknowledge our viewers right now. We have Brother Isaiah that's viewing. We have Brother Emil, Brother Carlton, Sister Janine. We have Brother Shannon. We have Sister Regina. We have my son, Brother Maurice, is watching. My cousin, Sister Nisi, she's watching. And Sister Marcia X is also watching. So I want to thank everybody for coming over and watching us as we present this. And again, my name is Brother Maurice, and this is Dr. James Jones. Doc, you want to give out the information for Manhood, Race, Culture one more time?
Yeah. We have a blog site, manhoodraceculture.com, and we also have a YouTube channel, Manhood, Race, and Culture. So where we'll be uploading more content and what have you there. So glad to have you here, and would like to issue a challenge. If you could get at least one person, two preferably, to join us next week as we're trying to build this thing and really directly impact the narrative of Black folk, because so much of it comes down to the narrative and defending the racial brand and uplifting both Black men and Black women.
Definitely. Thanks, Doc. Thanks. And so to continue on the path that we're dealing with, you also, when you defined manhood, you said it's a God-ordained position. And that's very interesting because I've never heard manhood defined as a God-ordained position. Can you go into a little bit more of why is that part important in defining what manhood is?
Well, I think it's important because men, and when you look at it scripturally, the man is the priest of the home, and the priest is the closest conduit to God, to advancing and applying what is God's rule. And of course, some of those rules, and this is sort of the challenge of being a righteous man. Oftentimes, we don't even agree with everything that God says or that God, places on our heart. However, that's where obedience and submission to a higher power comes into being. So I believe that manhood is God ordained the same way I believe that womanhood is God ordained. I mean, the continuation of life is going to come out of that woman. And when you really think about how awesome that is, and how both of those parts need each other to really flourish. Um, it has to humble you.
Mhm. Definitely, definitely. And Doc, um, when you're a man of God, um, in this world, in this environment that we're in, that I will call that's a satanic environment,
Mm.
and being a man of God in that environment. Um, how do you manage to stay a man of God versus falling into the trap like you would see a lot of the preachers? And I believe we talked about this one, the preacher that got robbed in New York City,
Yeah.
with all the bling bling and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Yet he's supposed to be a man of God, but it seems to me that he's fallen into being a man of the world.
Hmm.
How do you manage that and don't lose who you are, since you're actually living in the world?
I believe that you have to revert back to something, one of those old Baptist hymns, holding on to the unchanging hand of God. I believe that you need to hold on to God, and to in every way remember what's important. And what's important are the things that are everlasting, and no metal trinkets, no homes, no what have you, are going to be sufficient to go ahead and cause you to abandon what I would consider your righteous common sense. Yet at the exact same time that I'm saying that, I'm not advocating for a vow of poverty,
Mhm.
because we need good people to have financial and monetary resources. We need for good people to own land. We need for the righteous to be able to move something, to make something happen when it needs to happen. And far
Mhm.
too often, we've talked about righteousness, and we've talked about God and a relationship with God from a position of, I would argue, such humility that it begins to reek of cowardice.
Mm.
We need to step forward and be as big and bold and bad as our God is, and
Mhm.
stand upon those principles of righteousness. One of the more touching things that happened to me, and this is probably about, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. I Much like my sister and my father, we like to go shopping. We like to go to the grocery store, and I'll if I'm going to get some mustard from Kroger's, that's our place of choice.
Mm.
Um, I'll go through every aisle of Kroger's, just killing time looking at stuff. But and I have a big old cart, and I got a little bottle of mustard in the bottom of it. Okay. Um, so this one day, and actually I wasn't at Kroger's. I'm not brand loyal. I was at Walmart, and I'm checking out, and I had just come into some money, and there was a sister who was behind me, and this sister was probably, if I had to put a age on her, early to mid 70s,
Mm.
and she knew the cashier. So apparently she was a regular at this Kroger's and what have you, because they have a banter going back and forth. And this sister starts kind of flirting with me. And she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna go where you going, this and that. I need I need somebody, to help me. And so she's just talking, and we're laughing, and this and that, right? And I said, you know what, I got you. Go ahead and put your stuff up on the conveyor belt. I was gonna pay for her stuff.
Mm.
And she doesn't do it. And I was like, "Oh, she a liar, huh?" And he was like, he telling you to put your stuff up there." And so she puts her stuff up there, and I put my card in, and when you get the cash back thing, I think I got close to, I might have pushed for $300 cash back.
Mm.
And I whispered to the brother, I said, "Listen, give her the change." Okay.
Mm.
And so I grabbed my little one bag, and I'm walking away. and he's putting her bag there, and I can tell that he was giving her the money
Mhm.
because she let out like a yelp, you
Mm.
know, thank you, thank you, my brother, thank you, and I'm like, you're more than welcome, we got to take care of each other. And that's for
Mhm.
me what that pastor with all that bling bling and all that quote unquote material prosperity should be doing for his people. It's not the possession of money. It is the pursuit of money, which serves as the root of all evil.
Mm.
Get you some money because money is going to provide you with options and opportunities. And having that money, I don't even remember what I had done to get that money that I could give just $300 away. But
Mhm.
that provided me an opportunity to bless somebody who obviously, from
Mm.
my physical view, needed it.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So, what would I say to him? I would tell him to strip it all back down and be reminded of who you really are and your overall insignificance in this larger thing called life. Because when they lower you, especially if you're doing it the way that he's doing it,
Mhm.
Lord knows when they lower that brother into the ground, he gonna be stripped of everything that he has, held dear. Ain't gonna be no jewelry on him, ain't gonna be no chains on him, and what have you. You got to go
Mhm.
back down to the bare bones, and it's saying this is one of the reasons why I'm really happy and proud to declare myself as a minimalist. I don't really need much, but happiness, you know,
Mhm.
some good food, like Jay said, some clean draw, that's about it.
Mhm. Definitely, definitely. And I know that had to be an overwhelming joy,
Mhm,
to be able to service, the sister like that. Um, and I know other people probably watching who are not awoke, to the knowledge of self like you are, would probably be thinking, what's wrong with him? I
mhm,
wouldn't have done that, you know.
mhm,
And that is because their minds is just so stuck on this world and how this world operates, you know. Um, and that's why one thing that I know of for surety is the divine destruction of America.
mhm.
I know that they have earned this. They have earned it. And I try to make sure that I point that out to our people each and every time that I'm able to teach that. Look here, you got to come out of this thing. You got to
Yeah.
come out of the ways, the thinking, the action, all of it. You got to let that stuff go because that stuff is death itself. And they're going to pay for the crimes that they have done. And if your mind is tied up to their mind, you're going to pay. You're going to pay because you're not supposed to be integrated in. You're supposed to be separated from. And Doc, there was a time where our separation from them, it was a forced thing, segregation,
Mhm.
but we had our own. Of course, with integration, our stuff got destroyed, went away. Um, if we didn't integrate it, if that never happened and we were still segregated, and they say now that we're our quote unquote purchasing power is bigger than some of these countries
Mhm.
GDP or whatever. um, in your estimation, what would we look like at this point? Would we still look the lethargic way that we are now, or would we have become this powerhouse nation within the nation?
The truth of the matter is that we would be in a much better place right now. And I'm not calling for especially in that post civil rights moment where we have LBJ signing the Civil Rights Act in '64 and the Voting Rights Act in '65. Um, I believe that Black folks should be allowed, without any stigma attached to them, to work or to go any place that they desire to work and go. Don't have a problem with that. I didn't have a problem with them attending PWIs, matriculating from them, and going and working for white corporations, because in many ways that opens them up to accumulating more money than our people have ever had. However, our problem, once again, when you're dealing with the idea, we talk about segregation, but for the vast majority of Black parents, especially when you're talking about the 1954 Brown decision, which I think is in really, really ground zero to understanding how we got to where we are right now. Um, Black folk were not on the U.S. Supreme Court at that time. Okay, Thurgood Marshall was a mere attorney. Charles Hamilton Houston was dying. But in saying that, Black parents were not sold on integration. That was the white Supreme Court justices' decision. After they watched Mamie and Kenneth Clark's research of the black doll, white doll test, they basically say that racial segregation in the schools is doing irreparable harm to the psyche of Black children. That moment and that decision to integrate the schools is in many ways what undid us. When you're looking at the fact that today, and I ask this every semester of my students, how many Black male educators did you have that were not coaches? And you end up with zero, maybe one, maybe two, and what have you. Um, Black men were forced out of the classroom. They're not going to, and it was a 50-50 split at that time between Black male and Black female teachers, but they're not going to allow Black male to have any power over white females regardless. And not only are you talking about forced integration upon us, the vast majority of our people wanted a continuation of separation. They just wanted to have equal facilities because of Black teachers. And I'm not saying this because I'm a Black educator, but Black educators are the shit. That if we can educate with subpar things, Lord only knows what we could have done if we had first class things. When I go
Right.
somewhere and lecture, um, they have all the bells and whistles, even at the community college. I don't need that because I ain't got that at home. I can lecture off the top of my dome right now and make it entertaining, relevant, to you. So what has happened is quite simply you've allowed others to gain access to not only the minds of your children, but also to the minds of Black educators who are going to be teaching those children. At this present moment, I understand from a mentorship point, um, a motivation point, that Black educators could be making an impact, that they could matter as a result of that. However, let's be very clear that they got to teach that curriculum that is handed down to them. And if that curriculum, which I know it does, tells them to read the Diary of Anne Frank versus Asada or the autobiography of Malcolm X, they had better do so. Because if those kids don't pass that end of the road test, you're going to be without a job.
Mm.
So, things are, they have our minds and they have several generations of our minds, so much to the point that if we have a situation where a brother or sister articulates a different view of the world that is not in step with the reestablishment, the renewing of white world supremacy, you looked at as a, and this is their word, their dismissive word. Black women use the word narcissism. The world uses the word of radical to silence us and to shut us up. We're not radical. We're just in our right mind.
That's
And
right.
if you ever have, I did the opening lecture for the Houston Museum of Fine Arts. They had a photo, expose of Black Power from Gordon
Mm,
Parks. He had followed Stokely, aka Kwame Ture, around in 1965, 66. During the Q&A after I had spoke, we're going back and forth when we're talking, and I'm talking about the indispensable nature, the prerequisite even of being black minded to having black liberation and black curriculum. One of the white guys that was in the audience, you know how my German Shepherd, she'll look at you and she'll tilt her head like
mm.
he did that. He stood as he did that. He was like, you got a point. And he said, I came in here ready to argue and dispute and think that it would be some irrational stuff, but you got a point. He said, why are American children reading about a Jewish Holocaust survivor when we got all these grand American stories? And I said, and the thing is that not only should black children be reading Asada, Malcolm, The Invisible Man, Native Son, white kids should be reading it as well.
Mhm.
Because if you want to understand why many white folk have such non-regard for black folk, look at what they're exposed to about us. Hell, I would hate us too if all I knew was what was put on cable TV. I think they would. Oh, they're insane. So it always for me is going back to the mindset. And if you don't control the intellectual diet which feeds into the priorities of your people, you're going to continue to lose from day one to day forever.
Mm, exactly, exactly, exactly. Well, we are at our time, Doc. Go ahead. In your closing comments, I have another question for you to put into there. As I was saying, Minister Farrakhan will be 90 years old in May, and he just did Savior's Day. And as you look at the national scene, it's like, all his contemporaries from the civil rights movement era, they're all gone, and he's like the last man standing.
Mhm.
And to me, I look at that as a message from the God.
Reverend Al's still there, ain't he?
That's
Al's
so.
still on the scene.
Yeah, but that soul out nigga can't really go into many places like he used to. Our people done turned on the eye to him, so that he's getting a side eye treatment. um, and it's kind of funny because they kind of use him to try to overshadow the minister, but with the regular everyday people, he don't overshadow the minister. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? It's just not there. And like I was saying, I look at that as a message from God, as confirmation that, this message that he has is the message that our people should be embracing. Before Bill Cosby got put to jail and all these allegations came up, he was going around telling people, look, you don't have to be a Black Muslim, but do what the Black Muslims do.
Mhm.
Recreate what they creating. They respect their women, they do this, their children are good acting, and he was, really pumping it up. But what is your thinking on that? How do you see that? And
How do I
and do
see
you
what?
think that that was wise for Bill Cosby to go around and say?
It was certainly wise for him to go around and say, but there's going to be, even in your expression of wisdom, there's going to be some consequences for it. And one could argue that the expression of wisdom, of learnedness, and what have you, is going to draw the most extreme fire that one has. Now, if Bill Cosby wanted to remain free, if he wanted to remain in favor of a certain populace of people, he would have shut up and said nothing like so many others shut up and literally say nothing. So I don't think that we can judge it from a wise. I would use the word, was it advisable
Mm,
um, to step forward and to really put yourself in? And this is really, now that I think about it, this is really one of the primary differences between Minister Farrakhan and other Black leaders. They have, in one way or another, in some fashion of, maybe grants, maybe what have you, some reliance upon white America versus the minister. He has his own thing. They built their own society where you can't hamper their communication with each other. You can't, affect them economically because they're solidified and they're all working together. Um, Bill Cosby got himself into a level of trouble, and one could argue about Kanye and Kyrie as well, getting these brothers getting themselves into a level of trouble, a kind of trouble that no Black person with power has the ability or the will to help extricate them from,
mm,
because they're trying to protect themselves as well. So the message of do what the Muslims did, I mean, to be honest, I mean, I trace back this type of thinking. I'm a Washingtonian. I trace it all the way back to Booker T. Washington. The
mm,
idea of, you know, building your community within. And
mhm,
I think that, to return back to something that was said earlier, I think that we have to separate the difference between the ability to go to into white society, which once again I believe you should be able to go wherever you want to, with the need to go into white society.
mm,
And there's nothing in the laws of nature, the laws of physics, what have you, that says that impoverished poor people have to live amongst trash, live
mm,
amongst crime, and what have you. I'm reminded of something that Tupac Amaru Shakur said when he says, "Why do y'all think that we like the robber, that we like the rapist and what have you? Who you think they robbing? Who you think they raping?"
mhm,
And I believe that we need to, as a community, take a moral position against not only sort of an oppressive white society that force feeds our children the curriculum that they want them to have. And we also need to take a significant stride towards addressing those evildoers that are within our midst and do
mhm.
everything that we can to express to them either change your ways or you got to go. And in many
That's right.
ways, give them the opportunity. Let white folk have them. Okay.
Mhm,
If you want to rob and kill within the Black community, we gonna go ahead and let white folk have you.
mhm,
This is not the same as when Black men would be accused of something and disappear. No, we saw you do that.
mhm.
And as a result of you doing that, it's clear to us that you're not one of us. So go on over there with the mother folk. They got housing, they got food for you and everything, and some bars.
Mhm. Definitely, definitely. All right, Doc, you want to give your closing comments?
Just happy to be here, man. Happy to see my brother. Happy to be able to have a conversation that, in every way, reinforces for me that I'm not crazy, and sort of, allows me to remain grounded in how I am and get further settled in who I am and what have you. Just like to make the request once again to those who are viewing us to share what we're doing and to let others know, and let's make this thing do what it do.
Most definitely. Thank you, Doc. And again, we thank you all for coming and watching The Radical and the Doc. And we're here every Wednesday, 5 o'clock Eastern, till 7 o'clock Eastern. And I just want to say that we got to begin the process of implementing change that we want to see. And we have to understand that no matter all your good thoughts, no matter all your good deeds and your well wishes, this, that, and the other thing, but at the end of the day, there will be a battle. There will be a clash between good and evil. You ain't gonna, it ain't, you, look, the only way you're gonna get out of the clash is you dead and gone. That way you out of the clash because you already gone. But those that will still be here on this very earth in this lifetime, you will have to fight that clash. So don't you go being worried, don't you go and being scared, because the God is with us and we're going to do what it's supposed to do. So as we always say, you kill the nigga in you, I'm going to kill the nigga in me, and our God will reign supreme. We are Black first, today, tomorrow, and forever. Love you, family. Peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom.
Peace.
Peace.